Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to you to the Net Zero Energy Building Knowledge Series in 2021. This is our first webinar in this year and the 41st in the series. And we are happy to see the enthusiasm continue into our webinars with every episode that we bring to you. So thank you and welcome to today's webinar. I am Deepa. I am a senior project manager at Environmental Design Solutions, and I will be the session moderator today. So first things first, as you know, some of you are familiar with it. This platform, the NZEB Knowledge Series, is a platform for industry to share their expertise, knowledge, projects, products, technology, ideas, and even research to fuel engagements for net zero energy buildings and really push the envelope and try to get more net zero into our building stock. Now, little introduction about the METRI program under which we are hosting this program. The webinar series is executed under METRI program supported by US Aid. METRI is an acronym for Market Integration and Transformation for Energy Efficiency. METRI supports three main program areas, which are energy efficiency in buildings, sustainable cooling, and training and consumer engagement. The program works in partnership with several organizations such as the one that you see on screen, like Energy Efficiency Services Limited, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and others to implement various initiatives. The market transformation approach includes creating business opportunities for the private sector, scaling up of potential initiatives, enabling policies, as well as providing training for NZEBs. METRI supporting efforts moving towards a super efficient net zero target for buildings in India. The NZEB Knowledge Portal is a one-stop site for information on NZEBs, and you may explore this further on our website, nzeb.in. So our webinar today is about the ongoing research on urban energy models at CEPT University. Urban energy models, or UEM, are critical data-driven tools to support energy efficient, climate resilient city planning and its operations. They also play a key role in accessing the decentralized renewable energy generation potential within the city, which in turn help design and operate net zero neighborhoods. Presenting this today is our expert speaker, Professor Rajan Rawal. He is the CRDF Professor at CEPT University and Executive Director of Center for Advanced Studies in Building Science and Energy, that is CARBSE, at CEPT Research and Development Foundation. His research and education activities revolved around building envelope optimization, building performance simulation, thermal comfort, and architectural science education. He serves on the Organizing Council of the Global Cooling Prize and on many other international committees. He is the recipient of the Jeffery Cook Scholarship by the Society of Building Science Educators and is the first architect in India to receive the honor of ASHRAE Fellow. He's also chair of education at the International Building Performance Association. We welcome you, Professor Rawal, in this webinar, and we would like to learn about the UEM research from you. So I'm going to just make you the presenter.
Thanks, Deepa. I assume my screen is visible and I am audible to you and others. Thank you.
Yes, you're audible.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks. I'll be talking about some of the efforts which we are doing at CEPT since now about 4 or more than 4 years in developing urban energy model and how can it be pursued in India with a starting point of Ahmedabad where we work. So I'll be talking about initially what the urban energy models are all about, and then later on taking some examples of work, trying to explain what we are doing for City of Ahmedabad. This presentation is supported by my colleague Anmol and Karthike. Both are working on UEMs since we started the project, so I acknowledge their contribution. I also acknowledge the contribution of my partners, Energy Institute, University College London, Professor Paul Roosevelt and Pamela, and also our industry partners, Bentley. There are other industry partners, but Bentley is very, very active on this front. Drew Crowley is leading the efforts, and also a senior leadership from Bentley Nabil. The way we looked at the past to look at what happens today, in the same way, the future influences is what is happening today. And that is what somebody said in the past, and it's so true for the cities in India, that whatever is going to happen is also influencing what is happening today. And especially I'm talking about the climate and climate change and so on and so forth. So in context of India, where most of us are aware that in 2007, we got a first commercial building code, got upgraded or revised. In 2017, ECBC. We also got a residential code, Econivas Samhita, which are more towards the building level efforts to achieve energy efficiency. And now many of us are trying to push towards net zero targets as well. At the same time, beyond building level, we have India Cooling Action Plan and also Smart City Mission Guidelines, where government is trying to work at the city level and trying to improve the habitat. The context, as all of you know, that our cities are growing, their energy demand is growing, not just the cities are growing, but number of cities are also increasing. Small towns are getting upgraded to a city level. And that's where it's key to look at urban energy and urban energy models. And that is what I'm going to talk about today. Most of these approaches are either target driven or theory driven. We call it a sort of top down, which is at the city level, for example, smart city mission, or someone is trying to look at the urban heat islands at the city level, or somebody's trying to look at the public transport at the city level. Quite a few of them are top down approach. At the same time, many of us are also involved in building energy efficiency, net zero cooling. It's trying to sort of bottom up. But many times it happens that top down and bottom up really doesn't come together the way it should. And that's where the gap is. And that's where probably the work which is happening at CEPT, not just at the building energy the domain, but many other work, whether it is a heritage or it's a transport or it's a water and sanitation, a lot of work where we try to sort of bridge this top down, bottom up, and try to align them in a manner so that we get comprehensive outputs. Some questions here just to start with, and just to understand where the urban energy model and the work fits in. Do we know that how much energy do we typically use or typically consume in buildings, and especially in India? And answer is sort of yes, that we fairly know how much are we really consumed at the building level. Do we know what is the impact of building energy code at the city level? Further, that if I explain that a little bit more, that how much carbon emission can be reduced if we implement ECBC or ENS in city of Ahmedabad or in city of Jaipur or in city of Delhi? Do we know how many buildings do we have in a city and what kind of buildings these are? How do they get operated? If I get a chance to implement a code today in one city or two cities, do I know that how many officers are required, that how many buildings are coming up which will fall under the purview of ECBC, and per day I need to give a permit to 5 buildings or 10 buildings, or per year I need to give a permit to 200 buildings, and for that I will require about 10 officers? Or also, do we really understand that what is the implementation of a code at the regional economy or local economy. I mean, how many people will come forward and start selling a insulation or cool roof or even double glazed windows? How many processing units will come in and around Ahmedabad, an industrial area, who will supply a good amount of material to the buildings which are getting complied with the ECPC, and how many carpenters will upgrade their skills, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of questions which comes up when we start looking at the real implication of code and in reality. So as I say that sometimes we get answer which is yes, that yeah, we reasonably know how many buildings do we have in a city, based on either market data, the real estate data, or administrative data, which municipal corporation maintains. That it is possible. I mean, we know how much energy do we consume, but it's also probably possible to estimate at the city level what would be the impact of that. But that may not be enough to know the emission which can be reduced through the building operation. And the reason for that is that the Building Energy Performance Index, or EPI or EUI, whatever we call it, it's one way of understanding a city, and one way of understanding rather buildings, and how much energy does a building consume per year per square meter. And that we talk about everything which is above the ground. What happens beyond your building? What happens within the compound of a colony? What happens outside the compound of the colony at the neighborhood level or the city level? What happens below the ground? How much energy do we really use to get a water in our house? Or how much wastewater and sanitation pumping stations require in terms of electricity? Solid waste management or solid waste disposal is primarily through the fossil fuel driven vehicles. Do we really have an account of how many liters of diesel do we really use? And so there are a lot of areas where EPI is just one way of looking at how buildings are performing. But to perform, to operate that building, a whole lot of other services, and we call it how your building is getting serviced by a municipal corporation or by a government. And that's where a lot of energy gets used. And there are some economic numbers which people say that probably more than 65% of budget of some municipal corporation goes into simply paying electricity bills for either water supply or pumping stations and solid waste disposal or street lights, barring the transport and ancillary services like firefighting systems and so on and so forth. So it is huge. I mean, we don't have number in terms of energy, but we do know that how much budget allocation happens, and that probably can give us an idea of how much energy we would be using in some of these cities. But it is not as simple as just converting kilowatt hour into number of rupees or backward calculate and know how much are we using. It's a little bit more complex than that. And the way why the requirement, why do we need to do that, is because cities are still growing. We haven't reached the plateau where we are not expanding our cities, or in fact there are a lot of cities which are also going under urban renewal. Mumbai is an area where mill lands went into the second incarnation of cotton mills. Now we have huge complexes. Even in Ahmedabad, there are certain areas which are getting into, and many cities across the country who are getting our urban renewal plans. How do we really operate the cities or municipal services so that we reduce the cost? I mean, forget for a while electricity, but just to reduce the economic cost, which is getting burdened on the municipal corporation. How do we really start operating the cities with a better services? And also when people, I think there are 6 or 7 groups in India started talking a lot about district cooling systems and so on and so forth. And all of the approach which we see, the reports which we see, most of them are sort of top-down approach whenever they're trying to make a case for district cooling. Whether it is a small city or large city, irrespective of city, irrespective of typology, people do start preaching about some of the district level energy systems. Probably we need to carefully look at all of those. As you know that the spatial parameters of building cities do vary a lot. Urban form, if you look at Mumbai, it's a linear, more or less. If you look at Delhi, it's altogether different one. If you look at a city like Chennai, or the one which are more on the coastal region, they have a different kind of urban form. Their morphology is different. The kind of people and habits they have is very, very different. I really won't name an area in Delhi, but at one point in time, somebody was saying that about 700 liters or 800 liters per person gets used in one part of the Delhi in terms of water, 700 liters per day per person. And on the other side, you just have a 35 or 40 liters per day per person. And that's the sort of diversity we have. That's a sort of variation we have. And how do we really service these neighborhoods? Geographical factors are different. Some of them are flat, some of them are terrain. Again, somebody was telling me that at one point in time in Mumbai, they were not using pumps to supply water to the colonies, primarily because some group of engineers very early on at the development of Mumbai located the overhead water tanks or the water tanks at the neighborhood level high on the plateau, and through the gravitational force, the water used to even reach to the second or third floor in some of the neighborhoods. So a lot of these things has an impact on the energy consumption of cities. Service level parameters, high rise, predominantly high rise, predominantly low rise. What is the density of people? How much area each pumping station or water distribution station is serving? There are some cities where one station serves a lot, and I'll talk about that in a while. Versus in many cities, there are a number of small pumping stations. That also varies. That also changes the way we use energy, and then many other parameters. One of them is sort of source of water supply. Ahmedabad does get a water from Narmada and few other reservoirs, but at the same time, peripheral areas of Ahmedabad do pump the groundwater, and that also consumes some reasonable amount of energy. So how do we really account all these things when we start talking about energy at the city level, energy at the neighborhood level? It's a reasonably complex process. The urban energy model is basically a computational modeling and simulation of energy performance of either group of buildings in urban context or number of buildings in urban context. Account for their mutual interaction, not just the radiation models, but also how microclimate is going to affect how the urban service infrastructure is playing a role in servicing these buildings. And there are 2-3 words people use. One is urban energy model, one is urban building energy model, UBEM, which is primarily to look at just a group of buildings and interaction between them. But we prefer to use word urban energy model because we also account urban infrastructure and urban services into the count. And again, coming back that this is the kind of work where you can see whether it is a top-down approach where you just look at the market, you just look at the economics, you just look at the statistics. So there are a lot of proxies which you can use to develop an energy model, whether it is a population or local economic growth. Sometimes these are the black box models as well. And again, if you start looking at the physics-based simulation, if you start looking at the interaction between envelop and HVAC systems and envelop HVAC systems and water supply and water disposal systems, you get sort of bottom-up approach where a detailed representation of each system and their constitution takes part in aggregated whole building or whole system level, which is more suitable for urban and regional analysis. The reason for that is that many times we do not have access to information about local economy. If I really want to understand what is the growth of Ahmedabad in terms of economics, is very difficult to find, because at the state level you may get that number, at the national level definitely you will get the number, but at the state, at the city level, to get those numbers is, or even if I want to understand how many air conditioners got sold in Ahmedabad in last 45 days, although the newspapers are saying something, but whether you want to rely on that or not is a different case. So when you take a top-down approach at the city level, it becomes extremely difficult and probably not so realistic. So looking at many pros and cons, we decided that we will work with the bottom-up, more physics-based simulation and system dynamics integration. Also, people can take a hybrid approach, which we are planning to do after probably 2021 ends. While we were doing this, we looked at 85 projects, and this is where my colleague Anmol did his graduation. He looked at about 85 projects and trying to understand why people use these models. So about 75% people are using, or groups are using building energy models, urban energy models for energy forecasting. So what would be the requirement of electricity or energy in 2030, 2040, in the presence of climate change, 0.5 degree, 1 degree change, and how the cooling demand will increase, or even sometimes looking at the district cooling systems and so on and so forth. About 17% are trying to look at from the retrofits point of view, that what if we upgrade all the HVAC systems in a central business district of one or two cities, what would be the advantage in terms of reduction in emissions, or even a rooftop solar photovoltaic, what would be the interaction with that with the grid, or whether in the economic incentives which government is trying to put, will it really help the cause or not. About 6% of, as I mentioned, I was looking at district energy optimization, whether district cooling or heating systems, wastewater heat recovery, optimization of municipal network, and about 2% of them are just trying to look at the benchmarking, which I feel is a heavily underused sort of capabilities, that it is very much possible to come up with the benchmarking exercise based on urban energy model. I'll not talk about that project, but we have started working on urban level benchmarking using urban modeling. And these projects are sort of in more or less across the world, except for African area and Australia and probably Russia. You will see some of these are getting followed either in Taiwan or eastern side of China. What we are doing in Ahmedabad, definitely in Saudi Arabia, people are working in this area, especially for district cooling systems. Europe has quite a few projects going on these areas, and one of them is our partner, UCL. They have developed a model for entire London metropolitan region. And then again, on the east coast and west coast of US, there are some projects going on. Some of them have been achieved in a very advanced stage, and all of them have taken a very varied approach. As I said, it's an extremely nascent stage of work. So what does it entail? It's basically a database and data visualization on one side, and validation and calibration on another side. But when you want to reach that, one side you have a model development, which takes care of what is the information you need to put inside the model, whether it is archetype development or classification of buildings, what kind of buildings they are, and how do you really calibrate the energy models of those. And I'll talk about level of details in a while. But on one side you have a model development, and on the other side you have a model simulation, where you account for weather data, radiation models. You look at the thermal models of zoning and simulation, and many of those things many of you would be aware about what happens at the building scale. While we do that, I mean, we try to put these into two big baskets. One is a geometry, which is building geometry and location uh, kind of inputs, and other is semantic inputs, where you talk about what kind of building, whether commercial, residential, what is the construction of it, what is occupant behavior or schedules, which we need to define in energy models. In what climate you are working, what is the presence, is there a presence of vegetation, is there a presence of large gardens, is there a presence of a river next to you or any other large water body, and also trying to look at in present context what is the energy use and energy use data, and that happens through survey at some point in time. So there are two big baskets of inputs, one is geometric, one is semantic, and counting all these, I'll talk about what happened, what we are doing in Ahmedabad. And next couple of slides, or next slide, it's going to be very busy, so I request your attention that that for urban energy model, what is required and what are the sources from where you can get an inputs. In fact, the information which I'm sharing is work in one slide. It's a work of about 4 to 5 months, and it can be developed as a one full-scale PhD. But what we are doing is that what is the availability of the data, what is the accuracy of data, can you really rely on that? So the lack of quality of the data, or sometimes you get a data which is not usable in a computer directly, so there's not digitized data. Sometimes you do get a data, but it has a privacy regulation or some kind of use or restriction on that, and sometimes they are not available. So looking at what is required in urban energy model, some examples where you can rely on Google Maps. There is a GIS portal of Government of India called Bhuvan portal. Some voluntary organization also work on CityGML or OpenStreetMaps, or you can rely on Estate Department of Municipal Corporation, which has master plan documents, or urban local bodies register, or sometimes also state level census. Sometimes they are available. So available data is all in a black, limited availability is gray, lack of quality, or you can't rely on data, that is yellow, privacy regulation orange, and not available in a red. So that's one source of example. Another source of example, a lot of projects like USAID did Eco3 project, where they got a number of commercial buildings data. CEPT did a CBIRD project, and also GBPN project, which has a residential data. BE conducts surveys. So sometimes they're available, sometimes they are not available, not in the best of the form which you need. There are some independent market surveys are also people have done, and also the TMY files or EPW files, which are available in the portal. For a geometry data, either you rely on basically either GIS map with the geotagged, that here is just not just a plot boundary, but the form of the building. Plot boundary is still possible to get it from GIS and from municipal services, municipal corporation, but what is the form of the building right on top of it? How much height does it have? All that is sort of not available. So you need a third dimension of buildings, and when you talk about urban energy model, because that's where the importance is. Sometimes you do get building level information about the plot size and plot area, and what is the use of that plot, whether it's a commercial building or residential buildings, what is the floor space consumed. But again, that would be, I would say, it is more like a non-spatial data. It will be more like a Excel sheet. Many corporations do have a property tax data. In fact, now after 71st or 72nd amendment, a lot of ULBs, urban local bodies, do maintain a property tax data. Whether you can use it, not use it, it's a different case. Energy data, definitely some of them are not available. One need to do the survey. Utility bills, very difficult to get at the scale. Yes, 200, 300 buildings is possible, but if you ask utility to give you data for the large, it's again a lot of privacy regulations and privacy issues there. Discom data at some point in time at the grid level or a feeder level is possible, so at least you know what is when city is hitting the peak, or when one particular grid of one particular feeder is reaching at the peak, and so on and so forth. But not, again, it is not very much useful. It's still a limited data. In terms of archetypes and building occupancy data, it's not available. One has to do a ground survey. And urban infrastructure is, I would say, we are, especially with some of the work which happening at the central level, a lot of cities have started gathering the data, whether they use that data appropriately or not, but because of the installation of SCADA system and installation of many other automation, a lot of data is available primarily from municipal infrastructure or urban infrastructure. So that's a reasonably busy slide, but talks about how much is required, at what granularity do you really need to have it for a day or a daily basis or hourly basis or monthly basis or weekly basis. All depends upon level of details. At what level you need to go and work, at what accuracy you want to work. And that's where probably I want to spend another 2 slides on helping you understand what is the level of detail which we try to understand. So concept of level of detail is that if you have 76 triangles up to 76 polygons, you may get a very large form of something. Difficult to figure out whether it is a cat or it's a rabbit or it's some other animal. But once you start increasing the polygons, level of detail increases. That means it is easier to predict what that animal you're talking about. And if you translate that into a building, what happens is we call it a level of detail 1. Again, there are sub level of details available, but I'm just talking about 4 high level details. When we talk about level of detail 1, and this is in general been understood in the sector, that when I say that, oh, this particular energy model is at the level of detail 1, people will understand, oh, we are just talking about a block level and you're talking about climate. It does not talk about anything else beyond these 2. When you say level of detail 2, you have a little bit of more refined geometry. You also know that first 2 floors are retail, commercial, and upper floors are residential. You also know that what is the envelope characteristics, when it has been made constructed, 2020 or 2019 and 1980. Based on that, you also can figure it out what kind of construction that would be. Level of detail 3 is where you have a little bit of more understanding about occupancy. When people are occupying that thermal zone, whether it has a shade on top of it, what is the window to wall ratio you have. So a little bit of more detail about geometry, a little bit more defined geometry, and also understanding of occupancy. Level of detail 4, where you actually know the internal layout. You can actually find what are the air conditioned zones, which are non-air conditioned zones, whether it has a solar photovoltaic on top, and what is the sort of orientation of that. So you can also try to find what would be the generation capacity through those renewable energy systems. So that's where the level of detail 4 happens, and it basically talks about things very much in detail. Not necessarily that every time you work at one of them. Sometimes some area you have level of detail 3, and then sometimes you have level of detail 1, and still you can move forward with the studies. So what the intermediate level of details, again, it is there's a word which Anmol used a lot, which is a fit for purpose. That what is your purpose and how much detail do you want? Not necessarily that every time you need everything. If you just want to look at the urban heat island impact, you are looking at the surface temperatures only. You are not interested in looking at the internal spatial quality and so on and so forth. So again, whether it is a two-dimensional geometry or 2.5-dimensional geometry, where two-dimensional geometry is a spatial, but something which is non-spatial, which is more like an Excel sheet or CSV file, which talks about the height of the building of that particular plot. So there we call it a 2.5 dimension. You have 3 dimension, and then you have 3 dimension with the external features such as trees and many other external features which we generally find in the city. So this is what we call it a fit for purpose. And what is the purpose, and what are the details you will go into. And the simulation methodology which we generally adopt is sometimes a reduced order. About 29% of the projects have adopted this so far, where it approximates the complex simulation and to mathematical equations and the correlations of that, where you're just looking at the statistical and machine learning tools to be used. SimPro is one of the example of that, or City Energy Analysis, another example of that. They use reduced order models. Then there are some like Energy Plus and Open Studio or Design Builder. They look at archetype based and then scale up the results to a total area of typical simulation. So basically what you do is you simulate one type of building. For example, ECBC has 16 types of building which EDS had worked out, and you have sort of baseline case, and then you apply that. Okay, how many buildings do you have in city which are commercial? And then you apply the typology A to 3,000 buildings, and then typology B to 1,200 buildings, and so on and so forth. So it's a sort of scale dynamic model. About 20% of projects are happening on those lines. Some of them are also shoebox models, sort of just at the building block level, not even at block level, but the plot level. Whatever the plot boundary is your building, and you start looking at representative zones, and also sort of start working at this is by MIT, which is working on UIMI models or UMI tools. And then finally, the about 50%, which CEPT also includes in that, is about the work on a dynamic model. So it simulate each building individually with the contextual effects, and also start looking at how interaction between 2-3 buildings happens in terms of shading, heat exchange, or radiation models, and so on and so forth. The first, one of the first tasks is to understand how many buildings do you have in a city, and just a city map with or even a plot boundaries, or even a Google map doesn't really tell you what you want to know. And either you have to have a photogrammetry reality mesh where you actually can see kind of buildings you have, whether it's a sloping roof or high buildings, low buildings, what kind of material has been used in that building, including window to wall ratio. Or you start looking at point cloud models from LiDAR, where you capture the entire area on a LiDAR survey and start looking at what would be the impact of, what would be the kind of city which you're looking at. What we do at CEPT is we use a hybrid model between photogrammetry reality mesh and LiDAR point cloud. We fly a UAV across the city about, Ahmedabad is around 400 square kilometers or so, not very big city. But we, due to certain restrictions, we can fly only in certain areas because of either it's a military cantonment, or it's a airport, or some other sensitive areas. So what you see on the left-hand side is a sort of grid where we fly UAV and use a lot of computing power, I would say, to capture data, and not just to capture data, but also to analyze the data. It is definitely, I would say it is resource intense work, economic resource, computing resource, time resource, everything. One example is that the small area next to the Sabarmati and on the Sabarmati riverfront is where you see unmanned aerial vehicle drone flight path. But basically, we got a mission planning, and what you get finally is on the right hand side is a photogrammetry model. The way we work is that since we want to also understand what is the window area and what is the construction of it, and also the practices of shading, which is very predominant in this part of the country, including balconies and all. We take the precision to about 100 mm. So the way we capture the data is so precise that even a 230 mm thick brick wall or 100 mm thick brick wall, whether window is placed on outer surface or window is placed on inner surface, up to that level we try to capture. When we go to old city where a lot of buildings are sort of packed in a very close knit fashion, we may sort of increase the level of details. What you see is again sort of accuracy. This is a raw model. This is not at all process model. This is a simple three-dimensional photographic representation. What you see is the CEPT campus. And once we have that, actual computational work starts. What you see is on the first image would be what a LiDAR one, which is on the left side. And then one has to translate that into a fashion where you can use that data. Even sometimes a bus or a car will get picked up as a building, and you don't want that. Since we are working at 100 mm accuracy, any large automobile would be picked up as a entity. Trees will be picked up as an entity. So you need to filter. A lot of quality assurance, quality check happens before we start making a model. We rely heavily on machine learning and artificial intelligence of some of the tools, and also try to work out the 2D and 3D extractions. What you see on the bottom is the 3D building geometry picked up by through the machine learning, and also we need to train the model so that it also recognizes based on certain character, whether it could be a residential building or a commercial building or a mixed use building where you have a retail on the ground and residential on top, and so on and so forth, and also sort of starts doing a bit of color coding. So what you see on the extreme right is the way we train model. It reasonably picks up the geometry pretty well, as you see right hand side bottom, that even the curved or little polygonic footprint also gets picked up with a high accuracy. And once we do that, parallelly we are trying to work on how much floor space do we have in a city which is condition, or something which is naturally ventilated unconditioned. And to do that, we again rely on some of these. Definitely a power of computational power and power of information technology, where image recognition and thermography comes together, trying to figure it out what would be the window to wall ratio. If you have and again, a lot of quality check, quality assurance needs to happen. Even the tree will come in between and say it will not pick up the window area, or a street pole will cause a problem. So increasing a confidence in your model and trying to understand how much floor space is conditioned, and that's for that we use thermography, that more than X delta surface temperature difference means it is a conditioned buildings. And so basically thermography does pick up a high variation in outside surface temperature and something which is the glass. If the building is completely boxed building without any window and completely air conditioned, we will not be able to pick that up. But the moment we can see a window and a surface temperature of window, we do pick up that as a detail which we need. And then everything goes into the model. Occupancy schedules get defined at the entire region, equipment, lighting, glazing, construction templates. And then we run, basically it's Energy Plus, it's IDF we create, and then Energy Plus and Python together, and the model, or rather the model which was developed by UCL Energy Institute in London, which they use it for London metropolitan region, called SimStock. We use that to run the energy model for Ahmedabad. Now, when we do that, we are just dealing at the one area, which is just a building. But what about the other municipal services? And that's where the real challenge is. That if you look at Ahmedabad, it is few administrative zone, but not necessarily that one pumping station is serving within that zone. Not one water supply station is serving one administrative. A lot of overlap happens. That there could be one command area of one pumping station, but wastewater disposal will have another command area, and solid waste collection will have another command area. So that's where the things becomes. And this happened because the organic growth of a city. Definitely there would be town planning schemes, but engineering services does not really follow the town planning schemes, and engineering services that really doesn't follow the way some of the areas gets developed. So as you can see here in the left hand side, you have administrative zone, but on the right hand side you have various, just one example, the water supply, the command area of various pumping station. That one pumping station is, if you can see that little lighter blue color, the way somebody needs water supply, and if the capacity available from that pumping station, they will go and supply there, whether it is meeting the administrative zone, meeting the electoral zone, meeting the postal code numbers, and so on and so forth. It doesn't matter. So matching these various services I was mentioning here to and that too spatially on the city map it's a huge and machine learning and artificial intelligence really doesn't work there. One really needs to map this for high accuracy. So when we do that, fortunately, at least after mapping, we become a little safe, where we know how the water supply, and I'm just talking about water supply, just an example here, that either you have a groundwater or surface water from where water is coming, either Sardar Sarovar Dam, or we have another dam north of Sabarmati, whether it's coming from Dharoi Dam, and then at various water treatment plants, whether it is Kotarpur, and this is all area in Ahmedabad where we have a water treatment plants, and then those water treatment plants do serve to the water distribution station where we have a SCADA, and we access that SCADA to understand whether it goes to overhead water tanks and what are the command areas for those. And in that command area of one water pumping station, what kind of building do we have, and what kind of whether it is predominantly large housing colonies or central business district, and then try to correlate that with the floor space available, with the kind of use available, kind of. So basically, number of ways by which we start looking at the relation between a command area and electricity consumption, whether it is a large command area, small command area, relationship between meter cube of water supplied and electricity consumption. So with the various distribution zones again. So that's where the real work happens, where we are trying to put the energy model coming from the building and putting the municipal services on top of it. We are sort of halfway, or a little more than halfway. We have also started developing a dashboard which talks about how this information would be used and communicated. What you see is plot boundaries of Ahmedabad with the road network. These are some of the screenshots which I'm showing you. And then you want to see that water pumping or water distribution station 1, which is Navarampura area, what is the size it serves, and how many pumps does it have, and what is the operating hours of that pump, and how many annual water supply in terms of kiloliters it has, and then trying to look at that with some other water pumping station and their command area to make sense that, okay, high-rise buildings, low-rise buildings, and this is what the actual EPI of predominantly bungalow settings or high-rise apartment settings or low-rise apartment settings, comparing two water distribution stations, trying to look at land use, and then trying to look at what happens in that area in terms of 3D stock. What you are seeing is level of details 2 or 2.5, where each building has its own characteristics in terms of construction, in terms of heights, and trying to understand what is their water consumption per day and what is their energy consumption or EPI, and then trying to correlate whether that particular building which you see has what is a consolidated EPI. We still have not coined the word what you call it EPI, whether it is consolidated EPI, it's an urban EPI. We're still debating what should be called, but it will be in a coherence with the terminology which we use right now. It's called EPI. And then finally trying to look at what happens in the building, whether it's an old building, new building, how many people are there inside the building. So basically at the building level understanding and the end use level understanding. Definitely all of these does require a reasonable amount of calibration. It requires not just a simulation, but validating the data with the occupants, or either with the grid, or with the utility data, or with the municipal property tax data, and so on and so forth. And then trying to understand, this is one work which another friend who did, Nikhil, is trying. This is a urban renewable plan of central business district of Ahmedabad next to Sabarmati riverfront, between two major bridges, which is on Ashram Road, and trying to look at in 2030, if we start implementing a ECBC, what would be the EPI, a consolidated EPI of that, and if our cooling demand is increasing, how do we really curtail that, but still increase the floor area, and so on and so on. So basically, it's a parametric work which we did using a urban energy model. So a lot of work we have done, but again, I would say a lot of work is yet to be done, and not just one city. We are also working with other cities, and also trying to find ways and means to work with a little bit less of resource intensive work. So how can we scale up with the affordable way is also in terms of methods is also the work which we are doing. So it's definitely work in progress. I don't know how long are we going to take to get where we want to go, but it's still work in progress. And with that, probably I would like to thank my partners. Predominantly, we are working with the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation. C40 cities are also involved in this. As I mentioned, Bentley is providing a lot of support. Norman Foster's and Partners are also working on this project at some point in time, and Urban Management Center and Schneider's. Primarily, this project is supported by Department of Science and Technology and EPSRC UK with the UCL input. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Rawal. That was a very informative and interesting presentation. I mean, clearly the level of data and the kind of data and the level of data that UEMs will make available. I think sky's the limit. What we can do with it, the kind of policies that could be informed, and everything else that can come out of it is just on us how we make most of this data available to us. So with this, we open the floor to questions, and you can send in the questions in the chat box, and we will start taking all your questions. And so while the questions are coming in, I will just switch screens, and I will start taking the question which is already there.
So Deepa, can I stop sharing my screen?
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Your screen is visible. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So yes, let's take the first question here from Suresh. How will it be possible to bring about reduction in energy usage, recycle, and reuse resources which serve or maintain buildings and infrastructure for the existing towns and cities?
So I trying to understand the questions, but uh, yeah, I think urban renewable is one way by which you are not trying to encroach upon land outside city and start densifying some part of your city up to the extent where it is sustainable. I'm not saying that start making 100-story buildings, but at least where the infrastructure can sustain those buildings in terms of municipal services. At the same time, marketability of that, whether it's FSI of 4 or 5 or 20 or whatever, uh, and that's what probably I mean, that's what my response is, but I think I have not got the question very clearly, or probably it is little beyond UEM.
Sure. Next question here from Shivedita. How to see that the models get implied in the real condition? I guess implemented.
Yeah, so I think all onus is on the people who are working on the model. If it is easy to understand, if it is implementable, I mean, the way if I start showing a regression or linear correlation graphs to any policymakers, probably that doesn't make sense to many of them, or probably they don't have time to understand that. So it's everything will boil down to uh, what are you trying to communicate and how are you communicating. That's number one. Number two is the fit for purpose. If your purpose is just to look at the solar PV potential of Ahmedabad city or Jaipur city or any other city, uh, you don't really a 3D model. You simply work on the satellite image and you get rooftops. Or if you want to have a UHI implementation, the cool roof and so on and so forth, you start looking at the surface temperatures along with the footprints of the buildings, and that's it. So I think implementability is all depends upon what is the aim and how are you working with it. I mean, what we are doing right now is, I would say, is really stretching the limit to a place where you have answer for everything in very much in with high confidence. But that might not be required every time.
Right. Next question here from Arijit. Can you please let us know the software which is being used for the energy models? And a follow-up question from him is, can a user download and try to create such kind of models?
We use Energy Plus and some of the Python scripts to do energy modeling, and you can download Energy Plus freely from the USDOE website.
Right. I think there are some more questions which is pretty much similar about the software, and I think that has been answered. And then the next question is from Megha. What do you think is the scope of mapping energy consumption and implementing energy performance systems in existing cities of India?
So for existing cities and existing buildings, again, probably working on UEM might be overkill. If there are ways and means by which you can understand the energy performance of the existing buildings, whether it is a user survey or working with the utility, trying to understand at the high level how and when people use energy at what scale. So if the task is only and only benchmarking of energy performance of buildings in existing cities, then UEM is not a best approach. Or rather, it is overkill. It's like you're going to Sabji Mandi, but you are taking your Boeing A380. So looking at the purpose, there are other methodologies by which you can benchmark the energy performance of the existing buildings in the cities. If you're looking at something which is beyond that, what if these buildings gets retrofitted, or what if these buildings gets knocked down and you get a new buildings with a higher density or higher different kind of use from residential to commercial, which we experiences across the country, then definitely UEM could be of help.
Next question from Anshuman. Is the urban energy model open access right now? Is there any way to link it to Ladybug, Honeybee, and work on it at this stage? Or it can be accessed in any other dynamic way and not just data?
It is possible to link with the Energy Plus has linked with the other tools, so you can do that.
Right. Then the next question is from, 1 second. Wow, lots of questions coming in. Next question from Shweta. Does urban energy modeling help extract carbon dioxide levels of different entities and how they interact with each other at a street level?
No.
Okay. Then comes the next question from Debashish. How did you get the microclimate data at the neighborhood level? Did you also look at sensors?
Yeah, so microclimate data is the two ways. One is that you look at the satellite image and try to look at the surface temperatures. And second is you do some local weather stations, which we don't do. And then later on, you rely on physics-based simulations. But linking the physics-based simulation with the surface temperatures just to understand whether your model is behaving correctly or not is important. But we don't work at the microclimate monitoring in the city.
Okay, next question here is from Maharshi. I think she meant, or he meant photometry. Photogrammetry is a great solution for solving the city level geometry. I want to understand what existing data sets or survey data you plan to use for occupant and system level details.
So I think occupant is, as if you remember the one slide where I spent a little bit of time looking at various data sources and their confidence level. So once you have a geometry, the administrative data, whether it is coming from municipal corporation or it's coming from any other source like utility or any other even private source, will help you to understand the use pattern of that that kind of building. And when I say that kind of building, it's basically archetypes, and then you replicate that at the scale. You also probably would need to understand that it is not that for each building in a city we need occupancy data. It is basically a generalized data which we use to schedule occupancy and also to schedule operation of air conditioners and so on and so forth. So I don't know whether Maharshi I answered your question, or but you can send me an email later on and I can describe it a little bit more. I mean, because I can't see the question on my screen, I am little lost. But anyway, Deepa, next one.
Yeah, sure. Next one is from Manas. The LOD levels decide the accuracy of the urban energy models. What are accepted error percentages for a city level building energy model if one wants to look at the impact of energy savings potential with making variations in HVAC systems?
So anything above 85% of confidence level would be good enough. Now you can get that confidence in a various manner. One is that you either you have a LOD1 geometry, but LOD4 occupancy detail, or vice versa. You don't have occupancy details, but your geometry is super clear. Now that is where the experience and some of the previous work which people have done helps. So there is no straight answer, because for LODs and your geometry and semantics, if the permutation combination of that will lead to a confidence level. I hope that I answered Manas' question.
There's another question on form, kind of connected, I think. This is from Madhavan. Please comment on the form-based codes. Will it be useful for restricting the form so that we get hands-on with the geometry?
No, sorry, come again. I did not get clear.
Please comment on FBC, that is form-based codes. Will
Okay.
it be useful for restricting the form so that we get hands-on the geometry?
Yes, there are approaches which people have taken in 90s and even 2000 and even today, that at urban design level or at the local area planning level, there are plot by plot building regulations, and that means that when those regulations are getting formed, you have some regard for radiation, or you have regard for energy efficiency, and so on and so forth. So form-based codes definitely, once if they start looking at the interaction between buildings and energy services both, definitely can help achieve the savings. Probably right now they take many other parameters into the account, and maybe the energy consumption is not a high priority. But yes, form-based code does. I mean, it can offer a good solution.
The next question from Mahesh. Is there any conclusive research supporting the guidelines to develop urban planning and infrastructure from UEM analysis?
Not right now.
Okay. The next question from, yeah, this one we have already taken. Okay. The next question from Saurabh. Can we integrate the concept of solar geometry for building form generation with urban energy modeling for the purpose of modification of our conventional bylaws?
I mean, that's where the earlier question on form-based codes and this particular question. I mean, there are professors and also planners in Israel way back in 1980, and in fact, recently I got another book where I was reading. In 1956, they approached the urban planning with the aspects of solar shading or mutual shading, and so on and so forth. So urban, I mean, if you want to do that, you really don't need urban energy modeling. I mean, if you're just trying to look at the shading or mutual shading or just a radiation model, you definitely do not require, if or other way around, if you're just looking at a geometrical planning of an area, you don't need an urban energy model. But if you're looking at the integration of building systems, municipal services, elevators, and amount of energy used in elevators versus amount of energy used in water pumping, and if you are looking at all that at one go, then you need a UEM. Just for a solar planning, and there is a lady called Hadid, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, they have done a lot of work in 80s and 90s regarding um, solar shading. In fact, San Jose was one of the first city who, and in fact, Montreal also is one of the first city who implemented building bylaws with the right to sun and right to light kind of concept, where presently in India we have something called easement bylaws, where if I'm next to somebody, even if it is a common wall, I cannot puncture a wall and make a window. So there are some easement bylaws. So similar to that easement bylaws, people did work on right to light and right to sun. That means on XY days, my facade has to receive sun. You cannot build your building in a manner where my right to sun goes away. So, I mean, for pure geometrical purpose, I feel that UEM is overkill. But if you're looking at interaction between various systems at various scales, then I think UEM is helpful.
I have the next question on the screen because it's a very long question. So, yeah. So
let me read it. Let me read it.
yes,
I have another
sure.
question on my mind, sir. The engineering scheme seems to follow organic growth of the city here by not really aligning the local regulations as you mentioned. Could this lacuna be rightly filled by designers designing the buildings? If not, what is the solution? I am trying to understand the question. Yeah, but if okay, so organic growth, and if people are not following the local building regulation, what one can do, or what a but designer has to I'm not just a designer, but whoever is making a building must meet the building bylaws. And yeah, building bylaws can be made in such a manner that you get advantage of climate and you get advantage of other things. But if somebody is not meeting the regulations, then one has to meet the. There is no other solution. I mean, if I'm whatever I got from the question, Deepa.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Then I have the next question as well on the screen because it's even longer than this.
No, something else. Next slide. Yeah. Maybe I missed out, but to clarify.
Yeah, here it is.
What are long-term objective of this project? Also, you mentioned about ECPC code. With a long-term view of this project, would it become possible to measure retrofit? How these so the long-term goal is that if we have to reach, I mean, you have the question, you have an answer in your question. And if we have to reach to net zero communities goal, or we have to reduce the carbon intensity or emissions, not just at the building level but also at the city level, then what are the ways and means by which you can do it? So let me put it this way. ECBC, let's say we go for prescriptive manner, and my EPI is 140, okay, or let's say 200. Now, if I am in middle of the town next to water pumping station, I have public transport available on doorstep, and my energy consumption for the services is as low as 10 kilowatt hour per meter square per year for my building. My EPI will go up to, let's say, 210 from 200. But if I am at the remote place or a little away from the water pumping station, and on the terrain, and for not just water pumping, for all other municipal services, my municipal corporation really have to spend a lot of money, which could be equivalent to my EPI, which is 200. So actual EPI could be 400. However, I could be a ECBC compliant building, but am I really serving a purpose at the city scale? May not be. So the long-term objective is of this project is to understand where do we need to put our priorities. Yes, we definitely placed our priority towards net zero buildings, and that is where individually each building needs to perform very well. But at the same time, we cannot keep relying on inefficient services, or we cannot rely on uh, 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 drawing water from the ground because somebody is not giving me a water. I am doing that. That's fair, but really we need to improve on that. It's very similar uh, uh, to our water. I mean, there was one point in time people were not we were, I mean, at least in Ahmedabad, they were very apprehensive over the quality of water. I mean, TDS level, and hence everybody started putting RO systems. Now, because because a system cannot provide me a low TDS water, I am wasting 2/3 of my water. But when system has started providing me a good amount of good quality of water, especially through the Narmada water pipeline and whatnot, people have stopped using RO because they know that the quality of water is much. So what I'm talking about is the long-term objective of this goal is not to just look at the building, but building as a one of the cell of larger system, and that's where this project fits.
Yes, thank you. The next question here on the screen.
Does urban congestion and fragmentation of urban form density impact the urban energy demand at city levels? So this may help in future city level planning whether to make higher load density. I mean, it's not about higher low density. I mean, one can address high density, low density neighborhood, but high density, low density neighborhood, right now, all those discussion which are taking place are, I have not seen energy numbers getting counted there. Nobody talks about, yeah, people do talk about, oh, you have high rise building, that means you need to use more water, you need to pump the water, you need to use more electricity to shift people up and down. But probably if I am next to the water pumping station, probably it would be equivalent to a low density or neighborhood which is far away. So we still don't have numbers. We do debate on a conceptual matters on these lines, but we don't have numbers, and hence probably this might help, as you have rightly mentioned. But before we start getting there, we need to do a lot. And what I'm talking about is just Ahmedabad. There's another project where we have talked about, at least another group of CEPT, 400 cities in India are talking about what are the benchmarking for water supply and so on and so forth. So a lot of work needs to happen before we actually put a pin on the matter and said because of these we are asking for high rise low density or high rise high density. Any interesting observation about the part-time occupancy in a certain, such as CBD, which have high? No, I don't have an answer to that. If you want an answer to that, it's very simple. You just log on to some of the utility data, and you will be able to find. I mean, there are. I think IIT Bombay did a work sometime back looking at what happens in a holiday and what kind of holiday is it. So for Ahmedabad, they did come out with that. I think during the day, during the normal days, the work days in Ahmedabad, the whatever energy consumption was, but because of the Uttarayan, the kite flying festival, and that kite flying festival happened when we had a cricket match or some final, the peak was like more than the peak of the year. So probably you need to look at some of the utility data to get that out. Is there any research work, case study available publicly? The application? No, right now, no. I mean, there are some papers available on this project, which will tell you what we are doing. But this work is happening at a district cooling system. As I mentioned, that not much. We have not done work, but this can be definitely connected with district cooling. And so far, the kind of reports which I've seen in India, people really don't at this level, and a combination of this with district cooling. So that's lacuna which we are trying to sort of plug the gap in. Thanks. I think we are sort of end of the list of questions, Deepa, or do we have a few more?
Yes, there's one more question here. Can a window wall ratio be found based on coordinates and video ML? Is it a free code? Is it available on GIT Hub?
The one which you're talking about, how to find a natural ventilation and AC building, we are just developing that code, and I think we are probably about 3 months away before we put it on GitHub.
Great. So one second, something else popped up. Yes, sorry, one more question from Shantala. How accurate is it when mapping in old city, where the city fabric is highly compact?
It all depends upon how are we doing a survey. So if I go into details, right now the area which I showed in a western side, which was developed probably after 1960 or 1950, we fly UAV at about 100 meter. We fly UAV about 100-meter height and at a 40 kilometer per hour speed. When we go to a dense area, we might need to lower the height and lower the speed, and that might be able to capture the enough detail. So the camera has the capability. It is all we need to do is to calibrate our speed and height.
Right. So I think that covered all the questions. In case you have any more questions, you can email Professor Rawal directly, and you could answer the questions, or you can direct it to us at nzeb@edsglobal.com, and we will share it with Professor Rawal. So before we end the webinar, there are some announcements for us to share with you. Next week, no, sorry, not next week. Our next webinar is a project showcase on net zero student housing at St. Andrews in India. Do join us on 23rd April at 4 p.m. IST to learn more about this interesting project. We welcome you to join the NZEB Alliance if you've not already are a part of it. It's a network of innovators and adopters of net zero energy concept in India. The Alliance aims to accelerate the building sector towards net zero energy goals by providing an open forum for exchange of thoughts, ideas, and success stories. You can sign up on our website to join the Alliance. You can also feature your work on the NZEB portal, whether it is showcasing a project that you have worked on or that you know of, a high performance net zero energy project, or a research that you are or have worked on which has an insightful outcome, or opinion on something specific in this vast subject. So please write to us at nzeb at edsglobal.com. Most of you already know that we have a YouTube channel where we share the webinar recordings and many other resources. Now, as I've said, we've hosted 41 webinars so far under the NZEB Knowledge Series. And all of this has been organized under a playlist for design, technology, policy, and skills, the 4 key areas addressing net zero energy buildings. So you can access this wealth of knowledge as per your interest on our YouTube channel, NZEB India. You can subscribe to it so you have access to all the content. So before we end the webinar, I'd like to thank Professor Rawal for his time and this sharing very interesting and informative research which is underway. Thank you so much for the presentation. We hope you enjoyed today's session and see you in the next one. Thank you.